the Jewish religion, right? Okay, we just don't respect Zionism or any aspect of modern Jewish life to which 95% of other Jews in the world subscribe to. And you say, well, gee, that's, that seems okay. God forbid we should ever live in a scenario of having a few good Jews who are accepted in their society at the price of espousing the right political opinions.
Gentlemen, we have just 10 minutes left in this discussion, and what I'd like to do is there's one last question that we've been getting repeatedly from members of this audience and from our global webcast, and I want to pose that question, ask for very brief responses, 1 minute really, and then very quick 2-minute apiece closing statements. So the question that keeps on coming over the web and from the audience has to do with the connection between the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and solving the problems with Iran. Is there a connection? Will peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians help us to thwart the Iranian nuclear program? Let's start with you, Roger.
Well, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu came in with Iran, 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 and has since toned down that rhetoric. I was just in Israel last week, and Israeli leaders were, I think they are prepared to give President Obama's policies a chance. And I think what the President has done is said, Iran, yes, but we need to keep pushing on trying to build toward an Israeli-Palestinian peace. 62 years now, and as elusive and almost unimaginable as ever, although I am encouraged after speaking last week to Prime Minister Fayyad in the West Bank, who really is, I think, trying for the first time really to actually build the rudiments, the institutions, police, judiciary, rule of law on which any eventual Palestinian state would be based, and the kind of state that could be a reliable partner to Israel rather than an Iranian Trojan horse.
And that helps us with Iran.
Yes, it does help. It doesn't help us just with Iran. It helps us in the world. This is a conflict that poisons our relations with all sorts of people. It is a lightning rod. You know all the cable channels that are out there today, and you know the images that incessantly go out over them. If we can move forward, yes, a lot of forms of radicalism get, to some degree, defanged.
Okay, Bret, please, quickly.
Well, as everyone knows, if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is solved, temperatures are actually going to decline, global warming will be resolved, all good things, all manner of good things will happen. Of course, this is completely absurd. There's this view out there that because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, American soldiers are dying in Afghanistan and we're embroiled in elsewhere in the Middle East, as if the sectarian conflicts that characterize Iraq or the tribal conflicts that characterize Afghanistan will somehow vanish because we've solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That being said, of course it's important to try to work in some serious way to try to address Israel-Palestine. This will shock you, but the ultimate ideal solution for Israel and Palestine is a two-state solution based on a credible Palestinian state. But you're never going to get that if within Palestinian politics, Hamas, the group that is supported by Iran, becomes stronger, and political moderates, it's really not true to call it Fatah because they're not so moderate, but political moderates within the Palestinian community become marginalized. This is one of the reasons why a nuclear Iran is so toxic to the hopes of any kind of peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. Just, Roger, do you think that Israel will withdraw from an inch of territory if it feels that a Hamas government in Ramallah or East Jerusalem, directly supported by Iran, has the threat of a nuclear weapon behind it? If you want to solve Israel-Palestine, you have to be serious about preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. It's just one of the many ways why this is so important.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you. We now have 5 minutes left, and we're going to divide that time. Well, let's say 2 minutes apiece, and we'll almost divide it. Let's begin with you, Roger, for final statements.
Well, I would start by saying that a lot of people in Iran have changed places. They were in a mode of reluctant acquiescence to this regime. They're now opposed to it. The regime and the people of Iran are moving in different directions, opposite directions. The Iranian people are a noble people, and they have a sincere desire to move toward a situation where the second word in the country's name, republic, actually means something. And we should be careful, as the United States, to try to nourish that trend, move it forward, rather than do anything rash that would damage it. You know, Bret has tried hard to characterize me as somebody who is acquiescent, thinks it's just fine for Iran to move toward nuclear capacity or even a device that it might test. This, ladies and gentlemen, is simply untrue, and nothing I have written should suggest that. We should indeed do whatever we can to prevent that happening. And I think President Obama right now is doing a pretty good job of that. The deterrence that he's going to build up in the Gulf is going to be very visible to the Iranians. If he can persuade Iran's allies, Russia and China, to come on board in the Security Council, the Iranians will feel more isolated as a result of that. These are the kinds of things that can move us in the right direction. To suggest, however, that it would be just fine, it would be a good thing, as Bret keeps doing, to allow Israel or encourage Israel to attack Iran or to attack Iran ourselves, I think in the current environment in the Middle East, this would be an absolute disaster. And that sinister music that you heard at the beginning would then represent, more accurately, the kind of world we'd be moving into. We need to work in the opposite direction. It's difficult, it's arduous, it seems out of reach, but in some ways we are tantalizingly close. Remember, on October 1, we did have the outline of a deal. So that is where we should focus ourselves, on the young Iran, on the Iran that wants change, not on this sinister, deviant country that Bret seems so intent on portraying. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear Roger acknowledge that we should do, as he put it, whatever we can to prevent Iran from going nuclear. It's just depressing to me that whatever we can basically means sitting down at a table and more or less begging them through inducements to desist from the course they're on. My view of whatever we can is whatever we can. This is a massively serious threat that we would face in the United States, that Israelis would face in Israel, that Arabs would face in the Arab world, and above all, I repeat, above all, that Iranians would face if their regime were to become so emboldened by possession of the nuclear fuel cycle of a nuclear weapon. Now, there's been a somewhat strange character to this debate that Roger and I have had, because supposedly he's the liberal and I'm the neoconservative. But in fact, my objection to Iran's acquisition, my fundamental objection to Iran's acquisition of a bomb, is not really a strategic objection. It's not an American or a pro-Israel objection. It's fundamentally a liberal objection. Now, there was a time when liberals believed that liberalism had to be fought for. Liberalism had to be defended. That liberalism was not just a strategy of virtuous surrender to tyrants, whether they were totalitarian or authoritarian or messianic or sort of messianic or potentially messianic, but with interesting nuances and twists that Roger has described so admirably in his column. The certain sets of values have to be defended, and when they are so grievously violated in a country like Iran, that calls for us to respond, and respond forcefully. It is not incidental to the character of the regime that they say that a woman is legally worth half what a man is. It is not incidental to the character of the regime that they hang homosexuals, and Ahmadinejad, who really understands chutzpah, goes to Columbia University, of all places, to say that homosexuals don't exist in Iran. It is not incidental to the character of the regime that they call for Israel to be wiped off the map. It is not incidental that they deny the Holocaust. These are the central facts of the regime. This is a regime that understands itself above all ideologically and theologically, and we deceive ourselves. We deceive ourselves by saying those are mere words. Roger and I have one more thing in common. We are in the words business. We believe that words matter. We would like to believe that our words matter in print and what we're saying, as well as what we're saying up here on the stage. Well, it is incumbent on all of you to take that to heart and to realize that Iranian words matter too. And if you just treat them as a kind of meaningless obscenity, a sort of form of political pornography, you are setting yourself up for grave dangers. That has been the gravamen of my argument this morning, and I thank you for listening to me.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I think this debate is over, but this debate will continue. I know it will continue in the columns of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and I thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.